Hey aspirants, welcome to Insights IAS initiative. Today's first topic is a very often repeated area of UPSC Mains, that is gender. As I have always told in many of our previous episodes, every year either in paper 1, 2, 3, 4 or even in essay and specific optionals, the UPSC papers would kind of remain incomplete without a question on gender. So today we'll try to look into one such perception. You can combine it with other examples and topics related to gender we have discussed till now. So this is a kind of revision and also kind of analysis of a report that was published we can say exactly 50 years ago. Right, so this report was called Towards Equality Report and was published in 1974, which critically analyzed the status of women in India. Okay, it discussed various systemic barriers that confined Indian women to margins and never allowed them to come to the mainstream. So many people who commented on the report, or let's say the people who have formulated this report, for them the major target or the entity who was held responsible to rectify these wrongs was majorly the state back then. And as you know, what is the reason? The reason is because before 1990s, most of the work or economic and social decisions were taken by the state, and there was hardly any participation by the market. But now they have changed post the liberation of 1991. So here, the author has basically discussed many progress that has taken place in this past 50 years, and this progress has been remarkable, especially when it comes to health and education area of women. However, this progress is a kind of work in progress in many other areas. In fact, the new challenges have come of late, which is including unfavorable sex ratio, which is also having work in progress includes lower economic participation of women is still less. Migration is an issue that still has to be taken care of. Then informalization of labor is a very important concept under this. Then, in addition to what existed earlier, new forms of crime against women are being registered. The same time, we are now in a digital space where women find a greater challenge compared to men. So, another major addition would be, as we have discussed in many of our previous episodes, it is the climate change and its specific negative impact on women. So, when it comes to this, let us quickly check how this health and education have fared well. So, in that, if you see women's access to education when this report was made, that is in 1974, was very deep rooted. That is, access to education was not possible because of many deep rooted social prejudices, and they didn't have much opportunity, so it was limited opportunities as well. So the literacy rate back then stood at just 22% for women, whereas for men it was 46%. So why literacy rate was so low? It was because of issues like early marriages, then lack of infrastructure for women's education to be possible. At the same time, there were many social norms which prevented women from getting access to education in schools. But though this barrier still exists, we have made significant progress in the last 50 years, and now women's literacy has crossed 60% with various programs like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, and even before this we had Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and various awareness campaigns that government has actively participated itself in. Especially the girls enrollment has also improved in the STEM segment, where today 43% of those who enroll themselves are women. So this improvement in education has led to multiple positive impacts, driving changes in other areas. But gender disparities persist to continue, especially in rural areas among marginalized communities. So, for example, the new challenge we are facing now is digital divide among women, or digital divide with respect to girls, and how it is necessary to perceive this digital equality to ascertain gender equality in education. At the same time, despite educational advancements, women's representation in STEM careers, okay, though they are getting enrolled, the career they are going to create is disproportionately low, because it is necessary that support for women's career is starting from the family itself, especially in the STEM segment, and we need to have the state's role here, and market needs to make it valid, and the laws need to be supportive of it. So we have other aspect here also which defines that workforce participation of women, especially we can talk about workforce participation, the other area where there has been a significant progress, but there are many works yet to be completed. So in workforce participation of women, that also has increased a lot, but when it comes to female labor force participation rate, it is only 41% as of now, whereas globally it is 48%. And where this 41% has grown, it is majorly in the informal sector, which makes women having a lot of restrictions in the right as a workforce. Though government schemes like, let's say, Stand Up India has come, we have got Mudra Yojana for especially supporting women entrepreneurs. We need to utilize them in a large scale so that it starts making impact on the nature of this workforce as well. So if you see what is need to be done currently in this two aspects is about ascertaining the quantity of women's participation, that is the number, along with the qualitative improvements we need to check. So we can introduce strict enforcement of policies, especially related to child care infrastructure, enforcing equal pay at the workplace. At the same time, we should, as a government, incentivize women's entry into the workforce, especially into the formal ones. So the next concept we can understand within this is about the political participation of women. So according to when this notion is checked, we can see that it is a lot to do with, or it's in the form of a mixed bag. Why mixed bag? Because we know that after 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, especially in the third tier of the government, 33% of reservation is there for women, and there is a very great trend that more than 20 states exist in India where the reservation for women has gone beyond 50%. So that trend is really worth appreciating. But when it comes to parliamentary performance, only 13.26% of women are represented in the parliament, which is very much less than the global average. So women's role in political decision making, it is even more constrained, especially in the form of 7 women only holding ministerial position in the 18th Lok Sabha. So we are at a cusp of implementing the 33% reservation in the parliament as well, but it is very uncertain due to dependence on politically sensitive process of delimitation, which is yet to happen in the country. So, to address this gap, India must prioritize many kinds of reforms in the law segment to promote women's leadership beyond the grassroots level. So, especially in the top decision making sectors, especially political parties, we can say, should implement the pre-election capacity programs to give tickets to more and more female candidates so that their chance of representing their whole folk in the parliament increases. So now, let's say what could be the road ahead is that the understanding that women as a group is not homogeneous. That is, though we have made a remarkable journey from exclusion to inclusion in education, economy, and governance, it is not just about numbers, it's also about the nature of women as a group. So many commentaries have told of late that women are coming from a heterogeneous group where multiple sectionalities or multiple identities have a role to play in forming policies. Hence, we should take into consideration the intersectionality of understanding women issues. So intersectionalities would be, let's say, class identity, caste identity, urban or rural identity. So multiple identities, even age would be one of the identities here. So multiple identities and religious as well, right? So these identities make or mar the life of a woman in India even now. So if we consider women's group not as a homogeneous one but consider all these different sections, we can definitely strive quickly towards the sustainable development goal 5 and realize the dreams the towards equality report about India that was told 550 years ago. So this topic can, the statistics and discussions we made is relevant for all the GS papers. So you can answer and make notes based on the context of the question. You can just note down this practice question which goes like, women's representation in STEM fields has improved but their participation in the workforce remains low. So examine the factors responsible for this paradox and suggest measures to bridge this gap. This could be answered as a question for 15 marks. Try answering it based on the discussions we made by quoting the report that we just discussed and to compare that how India has grown in the past 50 years, especially when it comes to gender component. So the next topic is a very interesting one, a changing social order. It is a broad description of an important class of Indian society called the middle class. So you would have heard this word frequently repeating itself in the past 1 week amidst the budget of the union government being presented, and it is going to be called as a good budget for the middle class due to some benefits given to them. But this discussion we are doing is completely from the perspective of GS paper 1, Indian society, in which this whole class called middle class is having a major determining factors about the future of the nation. So basically, this article was in the Hindu newspapers, Sunday magazine yesterday, and this talks about a book written by a journalist called Manisha Pandey, whose book is titled, it is yet to be published and to be completed, and this excerpt is from the author herself. So, Middle Class India, Driving Change in 21st century. So though the title of the book is quite huge, you can just quote that it is a book written by a journalist. So according to the author of the book, she tells that every 8 out of 10 people, when they are asked the question, are you belonging to a middle class, the answer is going to be a staggering yes. So the idea of middle class in India, how do you define the concept of a middle class? There is no exact definition or a fixed economic or social limit. Economic, especially as it is the term class here, there is no fixed economic definition that beyond which annual income ceiling that the middle class will fit into. So according to her examination, she tells that middle class currently is a broad spectrum whose family income, annual family income starts from around 3 lakh and goes around rupees 40 lakh per annum. So this is the annual family income, and all of these people try to identify themselves as middle class. So here there is a lot of variations in the definition as well, because the idea of a middle class is based on the perception of the people rather than the economic limit. So lower end of the spectrum here, that is those whose income is more closer to around 3 lakh, they are considered as aspirational middle class. Aspirational middle class. And how they are called middle class, not based on the economic identity here, but based on the behavioral pattern. Right, so the observations we have made today based on this article would be useful to you in multiple places in GS paper 1 and also in essays and paper 4. So try to understand and listen to it carefully. So another important aspect she has suggested is that the generational changes or the change in the nature of Indian middle class since 1980. So she has mainly observed the changes and told that there are two major shifts in the urban middle class, especially the middle class. So one is the change with respect to relationship with money. Right, so when it's about relationship with money, this is because there's a lot of transformation in the economic system status of a family due to the 1991 economic reforms. So what has impacted people majorly is the families have turned consumeric in nature. That is, consumerism has impacted the families, making them a huge set which attracts the market from the different parts of the world. Earlier, this same middle class family was considered to be a frugal class where they would think twice before spending money, but the current middle class is a victim, or we can say, feeding on the idea of consumerism. Whereas the other major shift is about heightened sense of religiosity. That is, people have started taking religion as a concept very seriously, especially the ones who call themselves middle class. So this has turned middle class into political discourses of the country. So any political dialogues today happen, they have to take the perception of middle class, or else the chances of them coming back to power would be very difficult. Hence, this middle class is politically divided to a great extent, and they are influencing the social ideas of the same middle class. So at the helm of these shift are the economic factors also. What are the economic factors that are impacting the middle class now? It is the increasingly shooting up inflation. It is the recession in different parts of the world and in India as well, due to that is nothing but fall in the GDP percentage. It is very less job opportunities that are available to the public, that also is shaping the perception of middle class now. It has all pushed the middle class, which is by nature insecure. Correct, the middle class is called insecure to a great extent, and these ideas are nothing but pushing the middle class to protect its own economic interest. So this discussion of changing nature of middle class is very useful when you get questions specifically telling how Indian society is impacted by the larger spectrum of the middle class. So the next one is widening gaps. So this widening is gaps is within the middle class. So as you just saw, we have a huge spectrum available here within the middle class. The gap between them are increasing is a bigger question. So the middle class is usually, middle class was usually known for its attitude, special attitude and behavioral patterns. Whereas there was change, there was specific notion about this, but now there is a great change in the composition and structure of the middle class as well. Correct, there are changes not only in attitude and behavior but also in composition and structure. This is because we have newly emerging social groups within the middle class. So who are these newly emerging social groups? These social groups are adding inherent contradictions within the middle class, thus deepening the divide between them. Let's take, for example, there are Gen Y and Gen Z, which have brought many new ideas into the middle class, and they have almost changed the course of the modern Indian history, not only by the thoughts but also by their actions, we must say. So if you see, take for example the identity of queer community. Correct. So this has turned into a strong social group which is fighting for their various representations. And today in India or in the whole world, if you see, there are 135 million people who support the queer process. But even now, in many parts of the society, this queer group is not accepted, and the paradox is a reality. The other change is one we recently discussed in one of our ICANN episodes called loud budgeting. Loud budgeting is an idea that Gen Z is popularizing. The other idea of Gen Z is that they're not ready to take up managerial or leadership positions which contribute to the organization, but feel that their growth story is different by focusing on individual growth. And individual growth, they believe, is not about becoming a manager in an organization. So this idea of Gen Z is very much unique, and it is this perception that is bringing a lot of diversity in the middle class itself. So next was a discussion about Gen Alpha. So in one of our previous episodes, we have discussed what are these various generations. I think the video is about political leaders and their retirement. So do watch this video to know what is the Gen Z, Gen Alpha, Gen Y, and the newly born Gen Beta. Right. So here, what Gen Alpha tells is that this they are actually, according to this author of the one whose book is up to be released, she tells that Gen Alpha is having the real scope for transformation. Okay, real scope for transforming Indian society. Why? Because in this survey she has done to write this book, most of the people of Gen Z Alpha, they have a unique perspective on caste, religion, gender, class. All of them are non-issues for Gen Alpha. That is, they don't take all this into consideration. Especially within Gen Alpha, it is urban, upper middle class Gen Alpha. Right? They identify themselves as global citizens. Remember this idea, they're calling themselves as global citizens, and they don't fit into the traditional box of middle class at all, who usually look for stability. You also would have heard, in your UPSC preparation, that get a stable job, buy a home, marry a person so that you have stability in your life. That's the middle class, traditional box of middle class we talk about. But the Gen Z, Gen Alpha is not much into stability either in career or in relationship. Hence you would have seen the terms like situationships becoming popular among the current generations. So they basically believe in collecting experiences and not assets. These ideas are definitely going to be transformative and are going to give a new direction to Indian middle class. Another observation which could be used in your essays is about the report of the study, which tells that much of the middle class has stopped reading. Reading in the sense, it could be books or regular daily newspaper, unless and until they're a UPSC aspirant. They've stopped reading, and the source of news for them is multiple other areas like TV news channels or of late the social media. So these changes are telling that as a result of this, there is a great lack of awareness among the people about ideas like democracy, ideas like fundamental rights, especially of liberty, that matter to them the most. And this has led to a lack of, or a kind of inability to think rationally. Think rationally and decide logically. They have lost this particular uh, benefit that middle class once used to have in India. As a result, many of them are not valuing democracy anymore, which is negatively a negative trend. So, according to this author, the small hope is that the middle class that currently forms 31% of the population by 2047 would form a staggering 60%. So, there is a small expectation that the social and political changes and development of a nation that we now talk about has to be steered by the new generation that we are talking about, that is the Gen Alpha, right? So as of now, this whole middle class that we are talking about is, we can say, mired with many kind of conflicts and contradictions within itself, as we just saw that there are a lot of divides. In the future, the idea is that with the leadership of Gen Alpha, this society that is kind of disintegrated now is going to be a homogeneous lot, or going to be integrated, as Gen Alpha is highly speaking about global citizenship and disregarding the other divisive ideas. So the upcoming middle class is quite aspirational in nature and hold the promise of a new social order that could steer forward India's story and the idea of democracy. The next article was an editorial in Hindustan Times. It was basically about the Acer survey of 2024, which shows many positive results, and it has also told that Nipun Bharat has created momentum in education, and it is very optimistic for India at the cusp of demographic window that we are facing. But now, what attracted me in the article was this part, that is Sisyphean cycle. So, this is a very interesting story. Listen to it carefully. You can use it in multiple answers, which we will look into the other half of the topic. So, the legend of Sisyphus, okay, this person called Sisyphus was given, is based on a Greek mythology. Okay, it's a very simple story but has a lot of philosophical application. So the gods, according to the Greek mythology, had punished Sisyphus to roll a massive boulder that you can see here up a hill for a long period of time. He should keep pushing it till he reaches the summit. But what happens is, by the time he makes progress to a great extent, the boulder just rolls back down and he has to start from the scratch. So each time he almost reaches the summit, the boulder rolls back and he keeps on pushing it, kind of till eternity, we must say. So this story suits very well in our essays and ethics question. Let's see how. Okay, I hope you understood the story. We'll go ahead with its application now. It's a simple one, but application would make a very good impact in your answers. So how do we use it in our answers? Let's say we can specifically use it in GS paper 4, right? Especially when we write about red tapeism. Government initiatives are multiple, especially as India has had a socialistic leaning. Government initiatives, they have faced repetitive cycles of failure. If you analyze many of our surveys, due to why these failures, it is due to inefficiency. It could be due to lack of accountability. It is due to lack of, let's say, short-sightedness of the political leaders, or any of them. So if you see all the efforts we make to make a particular scheme of the government successful, it all boils down to the efficiency of the bureaucracy. So how much ever good the scheme is, we would have pushed the scheme in, which is a boulder, to a great height, but if there is no efficiency, the scheme is nothing but going to roll down in the whole plateau, right? So in the same way, a similar concept is black coat syndrome. Black coat syndrome is about the judicial delays. So any effort, let's say, to have public interest litigation where people can directly approach the court, or live streaming of court verdicts, all this definitely has a long way to go and it's very optimistic. But due to delays, the whole it's like boiling down to nil. So the third appealing idea here would be political and social injustice. When you get any case studies related to this, use the phrase Sisyphean idea. Okay, so even with policies, especially which are meant to uplift the marginalized groups, they often fail due to poor execution. correct, poor execution, leakages, and we don't have a proper follow up here, creating a Sisyphean loop. That is, you'll again roll it up. Due to all this execution, it will again fall down. So this is a better way of putting forward the idea of how we fail in effectively bringing out or effectively implementing the schemes. And the very good answer here, idea here is for your essay. Let's say you get an essay which is titled, give me a moment. It's not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves. It was told by Edmund Hillary. It is not the mountain that we conquer, but ourselves. So, what do you mean by this, and how is the Greek idea of Sisyphean loop work in this? So, there is a very popular French philosopher called Albert Camus. So he has written an essay called The Myth of Sisyphus. So he gives a new interpretation of the whole concept. So when I told you the story, it was very pessimistic in nature. We try to think that there is nothing good about what we are doing. All the efforts is boiling down to nil, so we have to keep putting efforts without any hope. So this analysis is in a negative tone. But Albert Camus gives a very different and a positive interpretation to the whole idea, telling that rather than viewing the rolling down of the boulder as a cause for despair, Camus suggests that one must embrace all this absurdity that is happening, and find meaning in the struggle itself. That is how every time this person tries to push the boulder upwards, he would have found a new way of pushing it to make sure he reaches a higher level and that the boulder doesn't roll down as much as possible. So it is in the struggle that the life's lessons are hidden, and not in reaching the ultimate destination of the summit. Right, he says that Sisyphus kept on pushing the rock, not out of hope that he'll reach the destination, but out of a defiance, as a challenge that we will not allow it to go further, or it will not allow it to fall down. So one must imagine that Sisyphus is happy, and it again brings us to a UPSC PYQ, very recent PYQ, that happiness is not in the goal but in the process. So I really like this idea, and I hope it appeals to you as well when you are using, especially in your essays and ethics. So the last topic for today is a case study from Nigeria. Okay, it had been published in Down to Earth magazine. So there, if you remember, we have been discussing a lot on plastic waste and in specific, and waste management in general. Why it is relevant, we can have a discussion at the end. So this case study is very relevant for your paper 3. So if you have remembered, across the world there are various policies to tackle plastic waste. So if some countries have used extended producer responsibility, many countries have gone to ban single use plastic. So different countries have adopted their own measures, and in Nigeria, what is the idea? The idea is to recycle plastic waste by segregate or making it as a business opportunity. Okay, and there have been multiple articles when I was referring today, which gave me an idea that it's a very successful model, and it has led to bringing up the economic opportunities for local people. But this model, why we are looking today here is, there are many reasons for which why people have taken this as a motivating opportunity, and how they have gone about to make it successful. Because if we are going to implement this in India, what could be the factors that are going to be impacted? So what was the motivation that really worked in Nigeria? So there is a research paper which has come recently, which has analyzed what factors made people take up this as a very great career opportunity. So the first one is education level and information that people have about this. Okay, so the study tells that higher the levels of education, higher is the understanding that plastic waste collection is a good form of business. So the lower the education level, the lower the participation in this. So what do we learn from this? We learn the idea that education programs need to be built into the waste management campaigns. So these campaigns, if you recall, we can draw parallels to this with our Swachh Bharat mission. It's one of the components is also solid waste management. So when we are designing such campaigns, we need to educate the people about how good this economic opportunity is and how they can very well utilize them to bring them their economic status upwards. So the second idea here was family size. Okay, family size. The larger the family size, they are more adapting these kind of business, because in any other source of business there is no much stability, but in this they have found slightly better stability compared to other business models. But the authors who have read this or who have made this paper, they have told that we need to formalize this business sector of collecting plastic waste and recycling. This sector needs to be formalized. The reason is, most of, take for example, in India we have rat pickers who are completely from the informal sector. So if we integrate them into the formal sector, make them part of the whole loop of circular economy, the chances of plastic cycling becomes more successful, and it also leads to economic and social upliftment of various groups in the society. So this is higher the family size, higher the chances of taking this occupation, but if we formalize, the chances of it working will be even higher. So the third idea that worked here was religious and cultural norms. So there is, in African culture, there's a lot of emphasis on communal responsibility and sustainable use of resources. So people perceive that collecting waste is not only for individual economic goals, but it's as a service to the whole community by keeping the locality clean. So the acceptance of waste collection has made it very easy to start this particular economic process in Nigeria. So when we are implementing this in India, we can also tap into such cultural ideas so that we can use the potential. And when it comes to gender dynamics, separating, especially those who collect plastic waste is mainly male. It's the male domain in Nigeria. But when it comes to segregating and marketing reusable waste, it is where women are performing better. So the author here suggests that if we provide more microfinance opportunity to women, they can definitely play a major role in this whole circular economy of recycling plastic. So this is very good example which tells us that microfinancing will be integrated with gender. So if you draw a parallel with India, self-help groups are going to be that microfinancing entity, right? So why this is important is, if you recall, December 2024 witnessed the world leaders discuss a lot about solid waste management and plastic in South Korea's Busan, all with the aim of signing a global plastic pact. And some countries have told that we need to put an upper ceiling on manufacturing plastic, whereas the other countries have told that we need to manage solid waste that comes out of plastic so that it doesn't get into the ecosystem. So to finalize a deal, we all know that there needs to be a balance between both, that is putting an upper ceiling on manufacturing and handling the waste of the plastic. So how do we work on the waste side is the example of Nigeria that gives us a good case study. So we can definitely expect a questions in mains related to solid waste management in general, plastic management in particular. So let us keep ready many of these models by the time we write our mains, so that our answers are quite unique from all the aspirants who give the exam. Stay with us to make your answers relevant and to get more such informative examples. Thank you.